When I opened my eyes, everything was blurry. The beeping machines, the white ceiling tiles, the IV in my arm. It all felt like someone else's nightmare. My mouth was dry. My ribs screamed with every breath. I couldn't move my left leg. I looked around. No balloons, no flowers, no faces I knew. "Where's my mom?" I croaked to the nurse. She hesitated, then forced a smile. "I think they stepped out." "They? Your parents. They came in earlier, but..." "But what?" She didn't finish. She just checked the monitor and left the room. It was my first moment of clarity after the crash, and I was completely alone. No texts, no missed calls, just a crushed car, a metal rod in my femur, and silence. I lay there for hours, replaying the last thing I remembered. Headlights, screeching tires, blackness, and now, emptiness. It wasn't until the next day that someone finally told me the truth, and it hurt worse than the broken bones. The nurse came back the next morning with a clipboard and a soft look in her eyes, the kind people wear when they're about to say something that stings. "They wanted me to let you know," she began, not meeting my gaze. "Your parents couldn't stay." I blinked. "Why?" She hesitated, then sighed. "It's your sister's birthday. They said they didn't want to upset her, with the hospital and everything." I stared at her like she'd just spoken in another language. "They left?" I asked, almost laughing. "I was in a car crash. I almost died." "I know," she whispered. "But they said you were stable and they didn't want to ruin her special day." "Don't ruin her day." That's what they told the hospital staff. That's what they said as they left their daughter, broken, bleeding, confused, to go eat cake and sing songs with matching t-shirts and party hats. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there in my hospital bed, a tube in my nose and wires taped to my chest, trying to figure out how love could look so much like abandonment. She's always been the favorite, my younger sister, the golden child, the pretty one, the achiever, but I never thought, not like this, not after this. The accident could have taken my life, but what really crushed me was the realization that my pain came second to someone else's balloons and cupcakes. It wasn't the first time I came second. Growing up, my sister got everything in soft tones and sparkles, dance recitals, new dresses, glittery birthday banners. Me? I got practicality, duty. "You're the older one, be responsible. You should understand. Let her have this moment." I didn't hate her. Not really. She was just the sun my parents orbited around. And I was the satellite expected to stay in line and not drift too far. But I always thought, deep down, if something bad ever happened to me, they'd show up. I thought pain might level the playing field. Turns out I was wrong. The day I was wheeled into surgery, my sister was blowing out candles on a unicorn cake. I found out later from Instagram. There were photos, matching pastel outfits, balloons, a custom sign that read, "Sophie's Sweet 16. She was smiling wide, arms around mom and dad like nothing was missing. Like I hadn't just gone through a windshield and come out the other side in pieces. I zoomed in on one picture, staring at my mom's eyes. I looked for guilt, grief, something, nothing. Just teeth, lip gloss, glitter. I lay there, bandaged from neck to ankle, and thought, if I had died, would they have still gone to the party? Would they have just added a moment of silence between gift bags? That was the day something inside me broke in a way that bones couldn't explain. 3 days passed. No calls, no texts, no knock at the door with flowers or apologies or even a half-hearted, "How are you?" Just nurses, beeping machines, and the ache in my body that never seemed to let up. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped, maybe this was it. Maybe they'd finally remembered I existed. But it was just junk mail, spam, or worse. Photos from the party. Sophie had posted a video of the surprise dance my dad choreographed with her. My mom commented, "Best day ever, my sweet girl." I stared at that comment for a long time. Best day ever. While I was learning how to use a walker, I kept waiting for the door to open, for someone, anyone, to come sit by my bed and say, "You're not alone." But no one did. Even the nurses stopped saying, "Maybe they'll come tomorrow." On the fourth night, I asked one of them to close the blinds early. The view of the parking lot just made it worse. There's something uniquely cruel about watching other people leave the hospital with arms full of flowers while you lie there with nothing but your own echo. I started writing letters in my head. To my parents, to Sophie, to the version of myself that still believed birthdays, emergencies, and accidents could somehow make people show up. But I never sent them. Because by the fifth day, I finally got the message. They weren't coming. And worse, they didn't think they needed to. There used to be a photo in our hallway. It was taken at the beach, the kind where everyone wears white shirts and denim like it's a uniform. My mom's idea, of course. In that photo, we all looked so together. Dad had his arm around me. Mom was smiling. Sophie was perched on a beach rock like a little model. The sun was setting behind us like some picture-perfect ad for family love. But now, lying in that hospital bed, I kept thinking about that photo and how much it lied. Because the truth was, we'd argued the whole drive to the beach. Sophie had cried because her hair wouldn't curl right. Mom had yelled at me for not smiling with my eyes. Dad had threatened to cancel the whole thing if we didn't act like a family for once. But that photo sat in our hallway for years like a trophy of something we never really were. I used to believe we were close. I used to tell people we were just busy, not distant. I defended them more than I defended myself. But now I saw it clearly. We weren't a family, we were a performance. And when the curtain dropped, when the car crashed, when the real test came, they didn't show up. Not even for the final act. That photo is probably still hanging in the hallway, still lying, still pretending we were something worth framing. But some truths don't belong in frames. Some truths only show up when you're lying broken, waiting for a knock that never comes. They wheeled me out of the hospital 7 days after the crash. I had metal in my leg, stitches along my side, and bruises blooming like ink under my skin. But the heaviest part? The silence. My parents didn't come pick me up. The discharge nurse looked confused. "Are they running late?" she asked. I shook my head. "They're not coming." She blinked. "Then, how are you getting home?" "I'll figure it out." A friend from work, someone I hadn't even known that well, showed up in an old Honda and helped me into the passenger seat. She brought me a coffee and a blanket. She didn't ask questions, just helped me out of the wheelchair and said, "Take your time." That drive home was quieter than any funeral I'd ever been to. Because something had died. Not me. Not physically. But the version of me who made excuses for people who let her bleed alone. Back in my apartment, everything looked the same. My books still on the shelf, my throw blanket still folded on the couch. But I was not the same. Every step with my crutches echoed like a reminder. You are your own safety net now. The pain meds dulled my bones, but not my heart. Nights were the worst. When the sun went down and the city went quiet, I'd stare at the ceiling and ask myself, if I had died, would they have worn black and cried? Or would they have cut the cake anyway? Recovery wasn't just physical. Sure, I learned how to use the crutches. I iced my leg. I kept the pain meds organized and went to physical therapy like a soldier. But emotionally, I was disappearing. I stopped answering texts, stopped posting online, stopped showing up to things. Birthdays, brunches, even Zoom calls. My friends noticed. At first, they checked in, sent voice notes, asked if I needed groceries or just a hug. But when I didn't respond, they stopped trying. And honestly, I didn't blame them, because I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. I wasn't just sad, I wasn't just angry. I felt erased, like the crash hadn't just shattered my bones. It had erased my place in the world. I felt like a ghost in my own life, floating, watching. I'd sit in my apartment for hours, just staring at walls, at the TV, at my own reflection, which didn't feel like me anymore. Sometimes I'd open my phone and hover over my mom's number. What would I even say? Hi? Remember me? The daughter you left in a hospital bed while you posed for party pics? I never called. I never texted. Because I realized something awful and freeing. If they could live without me during the worst moment of my life, then maybe I could live without them during the rest of it. One night, weeks after the crash, I stood in the kitchen staring at a spoon in my hand. I couldn't remember what I was doing. Making tea? Soup? It didn't matter, because in that moment, something hit me harder than the car ever did. I still loved them. That was the worst part. Not the silence, not the party, not the way they vanished when I needed them most. It was the fact that my heart, stupid, loyal, cracked, and aching, still wanted them. I hated myself for it. Because how do you love people who teach you you're disposable? How do you still long for the voice that left you alone in a hospital bed? I slid down the cabinet and sat on the cold kitchen floor. Milo, my neighbor's dog who I'd been watching during recovery, patted over and laid his head on my lap.
He didn't ask questions. He didn't need explanations. He just stayed. And in that tiny, still moment, with a spoon in my hand and tears in my eyes, I finally admitted it. I couldn't keep chasing love where it didn't live. I could still love them, but from a distance, a safe one, with doors closed, with boundaries drawn. Because the first step to healing wasn't pretending I didn't care. It was learning I didn't have to bleed to prove I did. The first time I left the apartment after the crash, it felt like stepping onto another planet. Everything was too loud, too fast, too alive. People brushed past me on the sidewalk, cars honked, someone laughed too hard behind me, and I wanted to run. Except I couldn't. My legs still ached with every step, and the cane I used made me feel exposed, like everyone could see I was still broken. But I kept walking, 1 block, 2. I ended up at a tiny coffee shop I used to love before everything went dark. The barista didn't recognize me, or maybe she did and said nothing. Either way, it felt like a fresh start. I ordered a tea and sat by the window, watching people live their lives, couples arguing, kids spilling juice boxes, friends hugging goodbye, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost. I was there, existing, breathing, holding a warm cup between my hands like it meant something. I still hadn't talked to my parents. Sophie had texted once, something shallow like, "Hope you're okay," followed by a bunch of heart emojis. I never replied, not out of anger, but because I finally understood some things don't deserve access to your healing. That day, as I hobbled home slowly, I looked up at the sky and whispered something under my breath. I'm still here. And somehow, that felt like enough. It was a Thursday morning. I had just finished my physical therapy exercises, small movements, painful progress. I was sweaty, sore, but proud. I'd taken a selfie, smiling with a thumbs up, my first real smile in weeks. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. Unknown number, no name saved. "Hey, Mom's been asking about you. We should talk." Sophie. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. No apology, no acknowledgement, just, "We should talk," as if we were old classmates who'd fallen out of touch, as if the hospital, the party, the silence hadn't happened. I could have ignored it, but I didn't. I typed one sentence back, "Where were you?" The 3 dots popped up, then disappeared, then came back. It was complicated. We didn't know how serious it was. Mom didn't want to scare me on my birthday. She was overwhelmed. While I was trying to remember how to walk, I didn't respond. Because what was I supposed to say? It's okay? It wasn't. But here's the thing. I didn't need their words to make peace. Not anymore. I turned off my phone. I opened my journal, and I wrote the truth down. I didn't need them to feel bad. I just needed them to stop pretending they hadn't failed me. That was the real betrayal. Not the absence, but the erasure. Like I was supposed to disappear quietly and not mess up their timeline. After Sophie's message, I couldn't stop thinking about that word, overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed by my trauma. It was like I had interrupted their lives with my suffering. Like I was the one who brought the mood down, who made things uncomfortable. And I realized that's how they'd always treated me. The inconvenient one, the emotional one, the one who cried too loud, asked too many questions, ruined too many family dinners by being too sensitive. When I was 7 and broke my arm falling off the monkey bars, Mom said, "Why were you even climbing that high?" When I was 12 and told her a teacher made me uncomfortable, she said, "Don't exaggerate. He's nice to everyone." When I was 17 and came home from school, crying because of a fight with Sophie, she said, "She's younger. You need to be the mature one." Every wound I ever brought them, they responded with blame. And the crash? It was no different. I wasn't the victim, I was the problem. An interruption to their plans, a complication on Sophie's big day, a mess they didn't want to clean up. That night, I sat in the shower for over an hour, letting the hot water pour over my scars. And I whispered the truth I had been avoiding. They didn't fail to show up. They chose not to. And choices have consequences. A week after Sophie's message, my mom called. For the first time since the crash, her name lit up my screen like a ghost trying to come back to life. I didn't answer at first. I just watched the phone buzz in my hand until it stopped. Then she called again and again. On the fourth try, I picked up. "Hi," I said flatly. She sounded surprised I'd answered. "Oh, honey, thank God. I've been so worried." We didn't know how bad it was. I cut her off. "Stop." Silence. "You knew, Mom. The hospital called you. They told you I was in surgery. I was in a coma for a die." More silence. I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "It was Sophie's birthday, and we'd already planned everything." "Yeah," I snapped. "I saw the photos." She started crying, or pretending to. "I made a mistake," she said. "I just didn't want to ruin her moment. I thought you'd understand." And there it was again. "I thought you'd understand. Not I'm sorry, not I was wrong. Just another plea for grace she never earned." I took a deep breath, and then I said the words that had been building inside me for weeks, maybe years. "You don't get to hurt me and call it love." She went quiet. I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call, and for the first time in my life, I felt like my voice belonged to me. The call didn't leave me shattered like I thought it would. No panic attack, no tears, just stillness. Like the weight I'd been dragging for years finally slid off my shoulders. For so long, I thought setting boundaries would make me a bad daughter. That saying no to family meant I was cold, selfish, ungrateful. But after that call, I felt something I hadn't in months, maybe longer. Peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters when your phone rings. The kind that grows roots. That night, I lit a candle, put on music, and cooked myself dinner, like an actual meal, not microwave leftovers. And halfway through chopping onions, I laughed, because I realized I was okay. Not perfect, not fully healed, but okay. And that mattered more than their approval ever did. I wasn't broken from the crash. I was rebuilt. Stronger where I'd been fractured, wiser where I'd been naive. Softer, but with sharper edges. They didn't get to erase me. They didn't get to rewrite my pain. And they didn't get to decide how this story ends. I did. I used to think survival meant isolation. That healing meant cutting everyone off, building walls, and sitting quietly with your pain until it stopped screaming. But that's not healing. That's hiding. And I had done enough of that, so I started small. I texted the friend who drove me home from the hospital. "Thank you for showing up when no one else did." She replied in 5 minutes flat. "You don't have to thank me. You deserved better. Want to get lunch?" We did. And then lunch turned into coffee. And coffee turned into regular Sunday walks at the park, with no pressure to talk about the hard stuff unless I wanted to. And somewhere in all that quiet companionship, I started to trust again. Not just her, myself. I joined a support group for trauma survivors. People with different stories, but the same ache in their chests. People who understood what it's like to be invisible in plain sight. And for the first time, I said it out loud in a room full of strangers. They left me when I needed them. And I'm still here. No one flinched. No one made excuses for my parents. They just nodded, because they got it. That room, those people, that truth, it became my new foundation. Not family by blood, but by choice. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, months into my recovery, I passed by a bookstore window. There was a sign taped to the glass. "Forgiveness is not for them. It's for you." It stopped me in my tracks. I used to think forgiveness meant letting them back in, giving them another chance, letting it all slide. But that sign, it hit me differently. I realized I'd been carrying their absence like a wound I kept pressing on, hoping they'd come back, see the damage, and finally say the words I needed to hear. I'm sorry, we failed you. But they hadn't, and they wouldn't. Not because they didn't know what they did, but because it was never a priority to them. And I was done bleeding on the floor, waiting for someone who never planned to bring a bandage. So I sat down that evening. No distractions, no music, just me, and wrote it out in my journal. I forgive you. Not because you asked, not because you deserve it, but because I won't let you live rent-free in the places I'm trying to rebuild. I closed the notebook, and something inside me, something old, tight, and bruised, finally exhaled. I didn't need their apology, because I was no longer living for their redemption. I was living for my own. It began with a paintbrush. I hadn't painted since high school, not since my art teacher told my mom I had real talent, and she shrugged it off, saying she should focus on something more practical. But one day, on a whim, I walked into an art supply store and bought a canvas, some cheap brushes, and a few tubes of acrylic paint. Back home, I turned off my phone, cleared the kitchen table, and just started. No plan, no rules, just color. Stroke after stroke, the noise in my head softened. The ache in my chest loosened. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding my breath until I was halfway through the second painting, and I exhaled like I hadn't in years. It wasn't about talent. It wasn't even about the art.
It was about reclaiming something that had been mine all along: joy. That night, I hung the painting in my hallway, right where that old family portrait used to be. Not to cover the past, but to replace it. Because this time the picture told a different story, a truer one of survival, of self-rescue, of someone who didn't just recover from a crash, but created a new road entirely. And for the first time, my life started to feel like mine. Tea happened by accident. I was riding with a friend, taking a different route home, when we passed the street I grew up on. Before I could stop myself, I said, "Turn left." There it was. The house. Same cracked driveway. Same chipped paint near the mailbox. But it looked smaller somehow. Quieter. Like time had peeled away its illusion. I asked her to stop the car. I got out, stood on the sidewalk, and just looked. The curtains were drawn. A birthday banner sagged in the front window. Probably Sophie's again. A part of me waited to feel something. Anger. Grief. That old ache. But it didn't come. Just stillness. I realized I didn't want to knock. I didn't need to be invited in, because nothing in that house belonged to me anymore. Not the walls, not the people, not even the history. I had made my own home now, with books and music and plants that didn't need permission to grow. I stood there for a few minutes, then turned around and walked back to the car. My friend didn't ask questions. She just put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Ready?" I nodded, because I wasn't going back. Not this time. Not ever again. My birthday came around a few weeks later. I didn't expect anything. No call from my mom, no post from Sophie, not even a text from anyone in the family. But for the first time ever, I didn't feel forgotten. I planned the whole day just for me, woke up slow, made pancakes, played my favorite playlist, and danced around the kitchen in socks that didn't match. I went to the park with a book, sat in the sun, and let the breeze hit my face like a reminder. You're still here. That night I came home, poured a glass of wine, and pulled out a blank birthday card I had bought earlier that week. It had a picture of a lion on the front and gold letters that said, "You made it." Inside I wrote to myself, "Dear me, you didn't need a party. You didn't need their words. You needed truth. And you gave it to yourself. You are brave. You are kind. You are enough. And from now on, your love will be your own." I sealed the card and put it on my nightstand, because I wanted to wake up the next day and remember, no one else gets to define what you're worth, not even the people who gave you life. I used to live like I was waiting to be invited in, into someone's love, into someone's approval, into rooms where I'd always been, but never truly felt seen. But not anymore. Now I walk into my own life like I belong, because I do. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never come. I stopped rehearsing what I'd say if they ever apologized. I stopped holding space in my heart for people who never made space for me. And in their absence, something beautiful happened. I made space for me. I filled it with things that made me feel real. Quiet mornings, messy art, people who show up when it rains, not just when the sun is out. I stopped shrinking. I stopped performing. I stopped being a placeholder in my own story. That girl lying in a hospital bed, wondering if she mattered? She's not gone. She's just not silent anymore. She's rebuilding. She's claiming her place. She's living. And for the first time, she's not missing from her own life. Sometimes I still think about it. That day in the hospital, the balloons, the cake, the camera flashes, the way my family smiled while I lay in a white room, broken and alone. And you know what? Let them have their party. Let them dance and laugh and tell themselves they did their best, because I've stopped trying to rewrite that chapter. I've stopped waiting for them to feel what they didn't feel then. I'm writing new pages now. Pages filled with people who don't run when things get messy. With mornings that begin in quiet peace, not panic. With a version of myself that doesn't beg to be loved. She already is, by the only person who stayed. Me. They went to the party. And I? I went on with my life. Not out of bitterness, but out of bravery. Because healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering, and choosing to live anyway.